everybody. Thank you for coming to my channel and hanging out. Today we're gonna talk about Game of Thrones and why it's so special and important to me. As somebody that loves books, is also hopefully and like kind of an aspiring writer, and just kind of what it's done for me and what I feel like it's done for the whole of fantasy and how it's changed a lot of the ways I feel like we see fantasy. Um so what's why Game of Thrones is important to me is because it came out in a time where I lost my grandfather. It was between my sophomore summer of my sophomore year into my junior year. And I remember being really, really numb during junior year and everything. So it came at a point where it's like I had to understand, living without him. He was very important to me and everything. I'm trying not to get into it because I might start crying, guys. But anyway, and so it came at a point where I was like, this would be something like he would watch. So I felt really connected in an indirect way to him. Why I was kind of like learning kind of where do I go next. So that was some of it too. And then during this time, I was kind of a vampire girly. I liked my vampires. I was kind of more into like urban fantasy, and stuff like that. I was really into Buffy at this time, and Angel. I'll talk about, maybe in a video, I'll talk about how I feel about the reboot of that's Buffy, but that's a different video. But I was in a point in my life where I needed something different. I don't know if you lived during the time of the vampire books, like it started getting really old and it started getting to be the same, especially if you're talking like House of Night, Vampire Diaries, like that show too, Vampire Diaries, like all of them started feeling pretty samey. So I needed something different. So I saw the ad for it and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. It looks good. I fell in love with it right when they started doing the politics, which is pretty much in the first episode. It did, like the White Walkers at the beginning of the first episode, that didn't really intrigue me very much. It was like mostly the politics and getting to hang out with these characters, seeing why like this guy is moving. Like it felt like an epic game of chess that I was getting really into. The conversations that the characters were having was really intense. And they couldn't, like, the paces weren't lining up, like, and you're trying to figure out, okay, is anybody good or is everybody just like against each other? And then you have the throne that's really epic. And the women characters were really interesting for a medieval Europe TV show. And it just felt so epic without a major magic presence. It was just people being people in a really bad way. And I think what kind of amazed me about this is I grew up in a time where obviously we had things like Lord of the Rings. I am going to mention Harry Potter here lightly. So most of the entertainment I was consuming that was fantasy related was very heavy magic based. Like, you had to have the magic and you had to have the magic creatures to really push that story along. Where with Game of Thrones, there is magic in Game of Thrones. There is also dragons in Game of Thrones. And there's Nightwalkers and stuff like that. They don't become, like, obviously the dragons in season 1. But everything else is so lightly in there that if you missed, like, if you just kind of ignored the magic stuff happening, you would still enjoy the show. Like, we don't necessarily have to have the Red Woman in that show. And her abilities to be able to do what she does. We could just have her as, like, a psychotic, woman that believes in this god and everybody's on drugs or something. Like, it, which would maybe be interesting, but that's not the case. But it could be something like that. Or she plays on people's delusions, stuff like that. But we don't need that to enjoy the story. And there's some parts that I really, like, I think don't need to be in there. There's, like, a couple of things in, like, the second season with Dany that I was like, you could have gotten rid of that and it would have been fine. Like, the Red Woman could have been taken out, and Stannis' storyline would probably been more interesting and more tolerable. I did not like that storyline. But it was really important to me to see that fantasy is not always this heavy magic concept. That it can be more abstract, and it can be lightly woven into a story. And stuff like that. And, I'm not a big Lord of the Rings girly. Like, I've tried reading The Hobbit like 2 or 3 times. I have not finished it. I have watched the movies The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, it's not my type of fantasy. I like to feel like I'm watching history unfold. And I think that's what Game of Thrones has given us. And then it's led to other people being able to write these epic stories that have magic lightly woven in. Like, you have Robin Hobb, you have Joe Abercrombie, Brandon Sanderson's on a different level. He's still high magic. But you have these authors that are able to have a light magic system and still be realistic. Like I think about the first time I watched the first season, and there's like a scene with Ned Stark. I'm not gonna get into it too much. Probably in my later videos I will. But I remember how so shocking that was because of the type of character he is. So it's like, and it's not shock to shock value. Like, George R. R. Martin is pretty clever when he kills his characters. Like, you can kind of see, like, okay, this is going somewhere where this character is going to eventually probably be killed off. Like, they missed a step in the Game of Thrones, where you win or you die, basically. So, like, if you miss that, okay, this is the consequences. And I think plot armor to me in like a heavy magic system is pretty common. Like, I thought Lord of the Rings had a lot of plot armor. Like, I feel like now I really don't want to spoil Lord of the Rings just in case. I'm going to have that one person that sees this video. I'm like, and is like, I've never seen a Lord of the Rings movie in my life. But there's like things in there that certain characters should have been killed off. Like, more like a supernatural thing. If you've ever seen that show, I got addicted to that for a while and then stopped. But that was like my experience with it. That's why it's so important to me. It came in a time where I needed it. I needed a change from the entertainment I was consuming. I needed to watch something that kind of got me disconnected to what was going on in my life. Kind of this idea of escapism. And then I guess I needed to find my new comfort show because like every time I have a migraine, like I usually put Game of Thrones on. I love Game of Thrones. And I think it's led to a lot more fantasy getting recognized. So my second point is kind of the ability, what has it done to the fantasy industry? I think it's opened up the doors of what we consider fantasy. And that we don't necessarily need a high magic system. We can have a story where it's very light on the magic system and it can still be fantasy and it still can be a good time. And it's not Lord of the Rings based. And that's something like I feel like George R. R. Martin's like kind of made clear. Like he read Lord of the Rings and he's like, I don't want to make a story like that. I want to, I don't know if he was reading our history book one day about War of the Roses and then he was like, okay, I'll just put dragons in there. I don't know what the story of how Game of Thrones became Game of Thrones, but I'm guessing that's probably pretty much close to what his thinking was. Because that's what it is. It's War of the Roses. Sorry, guys. And then you put dragons. So with the factor of, and it opened up a lot of doors to other authors to be able to do the same thing. Like, I started reading Robin Hobb's books. I know the first series is called the Farseer Trilogy. I'm not sure. I can't remember what the whole series is called. But I started reading that, and it's very similar to Game of Thrones in the aspect that it's very light magic. You have Joe Abercrombie, which very low magic. I read that book, and I was watching somebody talk about it, and I was like, there was magic in that book. Like, I did not remember. Like, I just was so immersed in all the characters and stuff that I don't remember there being magic in that. But I guess there's magic. There's magic in Joe Abercrombie books, guys, if you needed to know for future reference. Sorry, guys. But I think it's important to be able to have the grimdark. To have it where we can still have fantasy, but a little bit of realism. And not as much plot armor. I don't like that trope. I don't like the plot armor trope as much as, like, what I would consider realism. Now, you're probably laughing at me because I'm a big anime fan, and to me, anime has a lot of plot armor. I'm okay for some reason within it and being anime. I think it's because it's expected. Like, if you're watching a main character and they get like beaten up really badly, like, you know they're gonna make it out. Unless you're talking about some of the newer ones, like Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen, then, you know, you're questioning it. But, and I think, and I don't want to say, like, Game of Thrones influenced that, because it's a complete and total industry difference, but they could, like, Game of Thrones could have influenced anime to get a little bit darker, where there's more consequences. And I think that's what I've really, like, what was really important to the fantasy genre is we needed situations where the characters were in peril. And there was consequences for, you know, stepping out of line and doing things like that some of these characters were doing. And if you did something stupid, like, you know, stuff happened. And I think that was very important to me when I was thinking about like this video, and why I think Game of Thrones really started this idea of there's consequences for your actions. And that's a good lesson just in general that I think society just needs. And fantasy, to like the Disney princess movies, to like Grimm's fairy tales, like, well, Grimm's fairy tales, there's no happily ever after. I don't know. They needed a hug or something. But when we think about, like, stuff we grew up with, like, there was always a happily ever after. And then you see Game of Thrones, and there's no happily ever after. Like, there's no scenario that the last season could have had where it would have been happily ever after. I mean, there's some happily ever after for some characters, but for the society, no. Not at all. Like, there was no person that could have sat on the throne that would have made these people's lives better. Like, that's not something that would have amounted to, like, the happiness of the people. So that's all I have to say really on that topic. If you like kind of these kind of little chit-chatty discussion videos, let me know in the comments. And if you like more content, like, please like and subscribe. I am going to do more Game of Thrones content. I'm really excited about it. I have some ideas brewing. But I'm going to let you guys go for now. And you guys have a lovely day. And I will be back real soon. Bye.